All right.
Okay, it should be good to go.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yep. So this is going to be our next PowerPoint presentation. So we have some interesting topics to touch upon, and we're going to start off with bootstrapping. Jared, if you don't mind, go ahead and go into the next slide for me.
Go ahead.
All right. So the importance of bootstrapping and bricolage. This is going to be a topic that me and Corey Ann are going to touch on. The importance of bootstrapping in a business is because you're going to start off with the bare minimum. So you're utilizing your own finances and your own resources. And so a perfect example of this is going to be, for me, it was going to be GoPro. The gentleman that started the company, he started off with only $10,000. And so now it's the vast, beautiful company that we all know today, multi-million-dollar company. He started off just by selling beads and shells in the back of his van. So that's exactly what he started off with. So you have no assistance at all in whenever it comes to bootstrapping. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Jared. So just a few pros and cons of bootstrapping that we'll discuss today. Is that going to be, you have your own control over your company. And you have no, but the only cons are is that you're not having any type of assistance from anyone else. You're all alone in this. But that's wonderful about bootstrapping because you're able to build your own discipline. You're able to fail. You're able to learn. So that's going to create, of course, not only learning, but you'll be able to utilize this tool for the rest of your life. So the next topic that I'm going to touch upon, and Corey Ann's going to go into it a little bit more, is going to be bricolage. So we can thank you. So whenever it comes to bricolage, that this type of concept in entrepreneurship is usually how entrepreneurs do think. So you're going to apply certain metrics to new opportunities. So there's going to be skills. It allows the entrepreneur to personally develop and then also grow. And a great opportunity for me to bring up Amazon. I love Amazon, as we all do. So an example of the bricolage would be Amazon, of course, because they started with just having their own website. However, Amazon's built web capabilities for other companies to also utilize their business for different data for their business. So I'll let Corey Ann go ahead and touch on the next part of bricolage. So take it away, Corey Ann, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, just to add a little bit on to some of the advantages and disadvantages of bootstrapping, it is a low-cost entry, but you, again, like Sarah said, can be your own boss, but you get to be in control of everything, and we as entrepreneurs do love that. A couple of disadvantages include cash flow issues and equity conflicts among owners. And so one example of that I found was Zuckerberg through Facebook. He created Facebook with the help of several other students who later actually sued him for 300 million in shares because of those conflicts among equity issues. So the quality of the idea, oh, sorry, go ahead. Can you go back one for me real quick?
Sorry about that.
No, you're so fine. You're so fine. The quality of the idea and the team willing to realize that it could change the is also significant for funding to get it all started. You can go to the next one. Okay, and then one cool example that I had of was Apollo 13, the 1970 moon landing for bricolage, and why it's important. It's because you are tying together all of these. You're basically making something out of nothing, and it's super important to apply to entrepreneurship and starting your own business as well. And I'm going to hand it over to our next one.
Okay, so yeah, I guess I just want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurs and kind of how they make missteps along the way. So, there's a lot of different mistakes that can range from money problems to planning problems to execution problems. So mismanagement of debt and understanding which debts carry the most risk long term are important because it can have an effect on you short term in the way that your business works, and that can also have a personal impact on you depending on the type of debt that you end up taking on. And it's important to know the differences between those two things. planning problems such as moving on from failures, failing to reduce waste, failing to increase efficiency, and failing to capitalize quickly on successes is one of the problems that entrepreneurs make in the experimentation process. And then execution problems can include misunderstanding the consumer, not having an understanding of what they want, or misunderstanding the consumer through lack of emotional intelligence, and lacking the skill of practicing empathy is something that many entrepreneurs make in the process. It's always important to remember that we're trying to solve consumers' problems and focus on their needs. I think Jared had some
for sure.
as well.
Yeah, for sure. And under selling the product, like, so people have the mistake, entrepreneurs have the mistake of falling into this old way of doing things, of trying to have everything just perfect before launching, and they don't come up with an MVP, a minimum viable product, and they say, if we build it, they will come. And they're wasting all of this time, all of this money, all of this effort into a product that ends up not selling. So they need to experiment with an MVP and move from there. And they need to fail faster. They need to see what mistakes they've made quickly before wasting a whole lot of money and time.
Right, and just some ways to help prevent those common mistakes. I mean, at the end of the day, being an empathetic entrepreneur can solve a lot of those issues. If you seek to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand where they're coming from, you know, you get less tunnel vision and just focusing on your own self. You know, I think that idea of being consciously competent and realizing where your weaknesses and strengths are, to then hire those experts on your team. If you're not a finance dude, don't try to put together a financial statement. You know, don't try to keep up with laws. Hire that accountant or that lawyer. It's all about experimenting and learning along the way. At the end of the day, don't do anything stupid that's going to get you, you know, landed in jail. I think will really help you out. Just that that's your main focus, not to do anything stupid, not to do anything illegal. You can prevent a lot of those mistakes and missteps along the way.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, simply just having a CPA sign underneath your name on the tax forms, it will keep you out of jail. That's for sure. Because there's just, at that point, when his signature is there just must have been a miscommunication between you two rather than illegal activity.
Right, rather than fraud or something like that.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah, we can move on to the next topic there.
Wow, cool. So through chapter 6 of Lean Startup, there's a lot about testing and experimenting, and there's a lot that's covered in this chapter, so I'm trying to I'll keep it to a minimum here. But MVP, like Jared had mentioned earlier, our MVP is a minimum viable product. It helps us to have that process of learning everything very quickly, and it's the fastest way to get through build, measure, learn feedback loop with a minimum amount of effort. And that goal is to just help you test your fundamental business hypothesis. So in increments is where we're going with that. And the chapter covers the concierge MVP, which without a formal growth model, this business, it can get stuck in the small profit table. And so it's really super important to understand that these personalized services it's not a product of learning activity designed. It's to test the faith of the assumptions of the company's growth model. The MVP rule is to remove any feature and process or effort that does not contribute directly to learning, basically. And then constant feedback is making sure that as you are going throughout these increments and you're testing that minimum viable product, you're making sure that it is working and it's successful before you move on. It saves you a lot of time in the long run. And another thing that it covers in chapter 6 is the importance of early adopters. It suggests selling to early adopters first because they care about being the first product to use or adopt the new product to the technology. So if it's ready for everyone to adopt, we need to make sure that we know how much advantage one can get from being early. So that's one thing to consider with the early adopters. It also covers the Wizard of Oz testing, and you know, customers believe that they're interacting with the actual product, even though that the business is actually doing the work. But it's much easier to build on a micro scale level. And then the other two things, or one of the important things that it's covering, is the high quality experience. So making sure that if we don't know who that customer is, we really don't know what the quality is. So it's really important in understanding your customers. Like Ali said, it's really important to be empathetic and just understand where everyone is coming from to make sure that you get the most successful product. And we always have to ask, what if the user doesn't care about the design in the same way that we do? That's why it's super important to understand your minimum viable product.
All right, and thank you, Corianne. So I'll be touching on chapter 7 of the Lean Startup. So whenever we're talking about measure in this chapter, and if we agree and why. So first we have to define measure. So whenever the author is talking about measure for entrepreneurs, we have to measure our status and we have to see where we're making progress in the business. And so there's 3 A's of metrics that we have to attain to, and that's going to be, is it actionable, is it accessible, and is it audible? So audible is going to be credible to all employees, actionable is going to be used to measure learning, and then accessible is, of course, we need to be able to understand the reports. But really we want to focus on audible, and we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. So a certain thing that Dr. Meeks and the author touch up on this chapter is going to be, are we tuning the engine? Are we, testing and trying to learn new ways to improve, excuse me. So we want to be able to see if we're making progress by doing different analysis, such as flow analysis, funnel analysis, cohort analysis, just like Dr. Meeks touched on. And it allows us to be able to better understand our customer and be able to see the customer's wants and needs, and it also helps us to see where we may need to, just like what Jared's going to talk about, pivot or persevere. So actionable metrics, we need to be able to create a plan. We need to take that action, and we need to see, of course, what first is the most important in taking that action. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And so something that I really found interesting in this chapter that I love the most was vanity metrics, because my company personally, we do use vanity metrics as well as other metrics, but vanity metrics are always a great thing that we definitely use. Vanity metrics are defined as just numbers, just data from social media clicks, website views, social media followers, things that definitely look good, but aren't going to help your business grow. So an example that Dr. Meeks even touched upon was Rocket Company. They were only using vanity metrics, so they were just spinning their wheels. They weren't actually making progress. So we need to be able to use split test and measure our status, and of course be able to understand our audience, so that way we're not just using these numbers. And we need to be able to excuse me, I'm trying to speak English. We need to make decision to either stay on the path that we're using, or we need to be able to pivot. So you cannot use vanity metrics in order to just define your business, is really the main point that I'm trying to say. And of course, vanity metrics, you need to correlate to the company ROI. Doesn't mean sales, of course. So just like what our team does in my company, we have all of our teams collaborating. We need to be able to see, okay, but just because we have these numbers, where are the other numbers? We're making these calls. What progress are we actually making? So we need to be able to measure data, and you can measure data through different things such as Excel spreadsheets, CRM. And so it's great for the long term of the business, and allows for us, the team, to be able to see what's working through various testing. So next slide.
All right, well, I'm going to talk about when to pivot or when to persevere. And a pivot is a course correction, simply put. You're trying to test a hypothesis, and just to see if you to improve your growth of your company, your strategy, your product, your service. And the questions you're asking is, are we making significant progress? Are we going up and to the right with this company, or do we need to make the big change? And I do want to put out there, pivoting is not giving up. It's not giving up. I know we as entrepreneurs, we love our ideas, we want to hold tight to them, but pivoting is not giving up. Companies who have pivoted generally say they wish they would have pivoted sooner. And very interesting thing that the book talked about was actually having set times to have a pivot or persevere meeting. Like you get all the leadership together and you ask the hard questions. Are we significantly making progress, or do we need to make a change? And he's saying about every month or so do this, maybe every couple of months, but don't push it on much past that. Because you want to see how much runway you have in front of you, how much money you have to keep putting into this, or if we need to pivot and go a different direction. And as you can see from the picture there, when a plane backs out of its gate, it's got to make several turns before it can actually take off. And that's just like a lot of us with our ideas. I don't think we're going to get it right on the first time. We're going to have to make a couple of pivots to really tweak it. And there are some wonderful companies who've had to do this, and it's paid off amazingly. We've had to have some huge pandemic pivots during COVID-19. There's welding supply companies. There's a specific one that I've read about. They used to make welding masks. Well, they started making personal protective equipment, masks for nurses when we were in the shortage. And a huge one is GM. They stopped making vehicles in a couple of factories, and they started making ventilators. But one that really amazed me until Sarah opened my eyes to this one was YouTube. It started out as a dating website, and they had the motto, tune in and hook up. They wanted people, actually at the beginning, they were paying people $20 to get this thing going, $20 to put a little blurb on there, a little video about they like long walks on the beach or whatever, you know. But it wasn't working out. They were way too focused. They needed to zoom out, reevaluate their strategy. And as soon as they did and they opened it up to any type of video, it just took off. And about a year later, they were acquired by Google for $1.65 billion. So again, I just wanted to re-emphasize the point. Pivoting is not giving up. I know we like to hold tight to our idea. It's our brainchild, you know, it's our baby. But if it's not working, it's not working. We have to be able to be humble enough to see if we do need to make that change.
Jared, I like those examples of the pandemic pivots. I don't know if you heard this, but the alcohol companies are also working to make hand sanitizer.
That's what I thought. Awesome.
So this slide is about the batch. The batch is really just a way of engaging tasks in small batches compared to large batches. So one of the examples that they speak about is the process of sending out letters. And the people involved in the task, they kind of looked at two ways of doing it. Do we go through and from start to finish, sending out a letter, and send them out, you know, say we have to do 100, do one, then do the next, and then do the next, versus doing everything in one step, then moving on to the next one, doing everything in one step. And what they found was that the amount of time that was spent doing each of them was pretty similar. But the people that did it from start to finish were able to identify errors a little bit sooner. So let's say that the letter or the envelope is just not quite big enough for the letter that you had. Well, if you had written your addresses on all those letters already, you would have actually wasted quite a few letters because you can't actually put the letter in there. Whereas the person who did it from start to finish in that small batch, they identified it on the first step. They didn't waste all that paper. They didn't waste all that time writing down all that information. So it's just a way of kind of doing things in a smaller batch versus larger. And the goal of this is really to decrease work in progress. And so if we have too many things in the queue at one time, then it kind of spreads your resources too thin. And so this is kind of that Kanban system I know that we use at my job. We don't keep everything in stock. We have that just-in-time processing. And so when we pull something off the shelf, we also pull the Kanban card, and we make sure that we're taking that out and only replacing it when necessary. That way we're not sitting on a giant stock. We're not keeping too many things in the queue at one given time. And then this just talks about the death spiral that that large batches kind of lead to. You know, once a large batch gets a little bit larger, then you start adding more things to it, and then it's just a never-ending cycle, kind of an avalanche that gets bigger and bigger. And sorry, a notification just popped up. Okay, and then so yeah, that's pretty much all I had to add for that. But as far as the batches go, the idea is keep them smaller rather than larger. All right, and then pretty much with this slide, the single piece flow concept is kind of, again, going back to that work in progress, and then push versus pull, that goes into that Kanban system, but there's other examples that you can get into there. But as far as agreeing with the author, yeah, I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense to decrease how many things you're focusing on at any given time. All right, that's all I have for that.
Chapter 10 of Lean is all about grow, and it's about the engine of growth, which is the mechanism that startups use to achieve sustainable growth. It kind of goes back to that build, measure, learn loop. The faster that we turn it, the faster things work. Going back to the idea that new customers come from the actions of past customers, and there are kind of 4 main ways to drive growth: word of mouth, side effect of product usage, advertising, and then repeat purchase and use. Personally, for the company I work with, word of mouth is everything, so much so that we've had this giant referral program created where we sell a solar panel. So if we have someone refer someone else, the bonus for that referral is $1,000. Y'all, people have made like 22 grand just from telling 22 people about going solar. So we've seen word of mouth really drive our business, because who doesn't want free money? If you want to click to that second side for me. So where does the growth come from? The engines of growth are the metrics that we use to focus our energy. So determining that product and that market fit. Again, like I said before, the engines of growth are designed to give startups kind of a small set of metrics to help focus their engines. And it's kind of really that tug of war that we see, you know, where are we spending our time and our resources? And if they're not about learning, then it's kind of a waste. There are 3 main engines of growth. We have the sticky, viral, and paid. Your sticky is going to be natural growth rate minus churn rate. And the churn rate is basically the fraction of your customers who fail to remain engaged with the product. It's kind of going to be your disengagement and your loss of customers. Whereas viral, it's going to be the side effect of customer usage and person-to-person contact. It's viral and value, trying to increase that value or that viral coefficient, much like a virus, you know, it's all going to catch on. Whereas the paid engine of growth is all about the lifetime value of the customer. We're looking at how many purchases they make over their lifetime and really the cost of acquiring and retaining them. We're also going to look at the margin. How can we increase revenue from each customer? The focus here, things that are going to affect consumer behavior, again, that build, measure, learn loop, it needs to turn faster and faster because it's the engine and it's how we actually grow. But what happens when an engine runs out? You know, we need to have an organizational structure, a culture, and a discipline that's going to help and handle, or that can handle, rapid and even unexpected changes. It's all about having an adaptive organization. Personally, you know, I think that this is a very effective model for business growth. It builds on that whole build, measure, learn loop, and it examines business growth from all 3 different angles. So that's what we have this week. Anybody else have anything to add, or did we kind of touch on everything?
Good job. Good
Yeah.
information.
Great. Thank you, guys.